Hey there, it is Saturday, so it's movie night, and I'm here to present another quarantine quadruple feature for your viewing pleasure. My name is Paul, just finished my 29th week of quarantine, and week 29 was a wild one. Believe it or not, this week started off with Trump having his tax returns released by the New York Times. Even though that feels like it happened like 4 weeks ago because so much has happened in between, that's how the week started. That's where we discovered in years like 2017, Trump paid $750 in taxes. So someone with like a $30,000 a year salary is paying more in taxes than the president of the United States, a supposed billionaire who we found out is massively in debt because he's actually a very shitty businessman who sort of hoodwinked a bunch of people into voting for him because he's a savvy businessman and he's going to be able to run America like a business. But he ran America like one of his businesses, as in straight to the fucking ground. So after the tax reports came out, we had the debate, which was a fucking travesty, a shit show. Trump was just interrupting constantly. It was really frustrating to watch that for 90 minutes, just constantly talking over Biden. And of course, the cherry on top is that he was mocking Biden for taking precautions during this pandemic and for wearing a mask. And he's like, he wears a mask everywhere he goes. You could be 200 feet away from him. He's wearing a mask. He's wearing the biggest mask I've ever seen. And, you know, the world loves karma. Just a few days later, Trump tests positive for COVID-19. And a day after that, he is put in the hospital where he is being treated now. And a lot of people are saying, no, he's faking it to get out of debates. And that's just crazy. I mean, there's no way Trump is going to give up the spotlight and having to go quarantine for 14 days or something like that during a very important time on this election trail. He's not going to willingly do that. And also right after making fun of people who take precautions during the coronavirus, kind of implying that they're weak for him to get coronavirus, I don't think he's going to be faking that. Of course, the worst possible outcome here is that he has the best healthcare that our tax dollars can buy, and he is going to most likely be totally fine, and he's going to come out from having COVID, and he's going to tell his base, I beat it because I'm so strong. Look, it's no big deal. It's kind of just like a bad cold. You'll be fine if you go out and get it. Don't let it uproot your lives. Don't ruin our economy because of it. Don't take heavy precautions like these weak, frightened Democrats. That's probably what he's going to do just to continue getting people to not give a shit about this pandemic that he has royally botched his response to, which, I mean, has been proven as members of the Republican Party are just knocking over like dominoes with reporting positive for COVID. That's not to say that tons of people get COVID when they're taking precautions. I mean, it's a very contagious virus that a lot of people are getting, but when you're openly flaunting it in the face of the gods that this thing is not going to affect me, these people are blowing it out of proportion, of course you're going to get it when you're taking zero precautions and when you're being a total asshole about it. So that's what's going on now. Trump has coronavirus, and all of these people that were just celebrating when RBG died are now turning around and being like, you need to show compassion and wish him a swift recovery. You're bad Christians. You shouldn't hope that anyone gets a virus, and it's like, no one is happy another human got coronavirus. We're just fans of delicious irony, of cosmic justice. If you're walking around saying, I'm better than everyone at walking, I never trip, only idiots trip, and then you trip and fall on your face, everyone's going to laugh at you for being a dumbass. That's what's going on. No one's happy that more people have coronavirus. We want it to be gone. But all of these hypocrites that are saying, oh, you're happy the president has it. Nobody's happy anyone has it. It's just a ray of comedy in an otherwise bleak-ass week. But I don't really want to talk more about politics. We are officially in spooky season. It is the beginning of October. We're in October 3rd. It is time to watch scary movies. Summer is officially over, even though it's still 100 degrees outside. Stop pretending like we're not in autumn, even though our leaves don't change. We're in autumn, and it's time to watch scary movies, at least this week. Something I love are ghost stories, ghost movies, and I love seeing how other countries and other cultures present ghosts in their cinema. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Foreign supernatural horror. So I have chosen 4 ghost movies from around the globe, and I'm going to go over this real quick. First movie we're going to watch, really one of the scariest movies that I saw in the entire past decade. It is called Terrified. This is an Argentinian horror film about a street, like a cul-de-sac, that has a ghostly phenomenon happening in 3 houses on the street. And the way they do their ghosts is so visceral and frightening. The movie is really a masterclass in dread and tension and pure terror. This is a really freaky movie. Now, granted, I've only seen it once. It was on Shudder, unless you buy a disc. Shudder's the only way you can watch it. And this movie is the reason that I got a Shudder subscription. And it was the first movie I watched when I first got Shudder years ago. And I watched it in the middle of the night in my living room by myself with all the lights off, and it did the trick, and I got really scared. So I need to watch it again to see if it's just as scary as I remember, but I'm going to be watching this one tonight because I thought it was a really fantastic ghost movie with some fucked up, kind of visceral, disgusting, really frightening ghosts. I had not seen the supernatural done in quite the way that Terrified does. Next movie we are going to be watching, head on over to Iran for Under the Shadow. Under the Shadow is about a woman and her daughter that are living in their mostly abandoned apartment building in war-torn Iran. And I love the backdrop of kind of a war-torn country for a supernatural kind of ghost story because it's supernatural horror set amidst the world of real horror. And it justifies why they're very alone in this building, and it explains why they're not leaving, but they do a really great job of building suspense and having the scares in here as well. It's just kind of a very unique supernatural tale. This is a film by a guy named Babak Anvari, who then went to do an American film called Wounds, which was, very bizarre. I actually really liked it, but it got really bad reviews. But I think he has a very nice style and really builds suspense and dread very well. And there's a lot of moments in here that kind of made me really jump. But I think Under the Shadow is a really great supernatural ghost movie. That one's from Iran. Okay, now we're going to hop on over to South Korea for The Wailing. Now, Under the Shadow and Terrified, they're quick watches. They're both like an hour and a half or something like that. The Wailing is like 2.5 hours. So this one's a commitment, but it is fantastic. So I would say it's well worth the 2.5 hour runtime. The Wailing starts as a relatively standard police procedural with a detective going to a small village to figure out a sickness that is spreading through the village, a mysterious illness that people are getting, and then his daughter becomes one of the people who gets sick, and he realizes that she might be possessed by a demon, so he has to put his own beliefs aside and start to take all of the precautions he can to try to save his daughter. So it's very fascinating to see how another culture treats kind of a demon exorcism movie. It's just an otherworldly film. I mean, this is a snapshot of a place that we are totally foreign to here in America. Seeing this vision, this could have only come from another country. So it's really about what we're willing to do for saving our families, even if it's at the expense of our own belief systems. And it's a really powerful film. It's very effective. It uses its long runtime to really draw you in, and the movie goes to extremes. It's really a wild film. If you're familiar with South Korean cinema, they go balls to the wall all the time, and this film is no exception. It's really out there, but it is really just an impeccably made film. It's very, very good. In fact, The Wailing, Under the Shadow, and Terrified, I made like a top 25 horror films of the decade. All 3 of them were on the list. Highly recommend it as a great film, but also perfect for Halloween season. Very unsettling and harrowing and intense. The Wailing. Our last film from a master filmmaker that we all know and love. This one was from Spain. It was a co-production between Mexico and Spain. It was filmed in Spain, so this one is obviously in Spanish. The Devil's Backbone by Guillermo del Toro. His first film was Cronos, and this one is a big step up in style, budget, and production value. So the first film that Guillermo del Toro made was Cronos. Then he got hired to make an American film for Dimension called Mimic. And Mimic is okay, but he lost a lot of final cut control. So the studio took the movie away, made a lot of heavy edits, and changed some stuff around and released it, a version that he wasn't totally proud of. So then he went back to Spain and made The Devil's Backbone, a movie where he had more visual control. And then after The Devil's Backbone, he made a couple more American films. He started making these big comic book adaptations. He made Blade 2, he did Hellboy, and after Hellboy, I believe, is when he then went and did his third Spanish language film that everyone knows and loves, Pan's Labyrinth. And that was really, I mean, he was a very famous filmmaker before that, but I feel that was his sort of worldwide acceptance into being a filmmaker that everyone loves. This one is really fantastic. It's set during the last handful of days of the Spanish Civil War, and it's set in an orphanage, a boys' orphanage. And the orphanage visually is so cool because it's kind of like this crop of buildings that's in a big square, and there's a big opening in the middle, like a courtyard. And during the war, a bomb was dropped, and it landed right in the middle of this orphanage in the courtyard, and it didn't blow up. So the backdrop of this film is also kind of a war-torn country, and there's a huge bomb right in the middle of the orphanage that just hasn't exploded. And they say bomb people came out and defused it, but some of the kids believe that they didn't actually, and that it's still a live bomb sitting there waiting to go off. So that kind of adds a layer of tension to the thing as well. But also the way that Guillermo del Toro does ghosts is unlike any other ghost movie I've ever seen. He has this really amazing style for supernatural horror that he started in The Devil's Backbone and would later go on to perfect in Crimson Peak. I love the way he does ghosts in Crimson Peak. But it's a ghost. In the very beginning of the movie, you see this kid lying on the ground with a big wound in his head, and then you just see someone dump him into a little pool. So he's like floating down, and the blood is coming out of his wound, and it's just like floating in the water, right? And that's how he dies. And so whenever you see the ghost in the movie, he's like a spooky looking ghost, but the blood is still flowing out of his head as if it's in the water, but it's just floating in the air. And visually, it's so fascinating. It's a really interesting way to portray ghosts. This one's also a really good story. It's got a lot going on with the woman who owns the orphanage, people who work for her. Someone is there working at the orphanage who used to be a student there, but really he's looking for the gold that keeps the orphanage afloat. He's trying to steal it for himself. So there's a lot of drama going on as well. There's a lot of different relationships, but of course it focuses mostly on the group of boys that are orphans in the home. And there's a new boy who's just been dropped off because his father died in the war, and they don't want to tell him his father died in the war, so it's like, oh, he'll be back to get you soon. But this orphanage doesn't even know how long it can sustain. They're running out of money. They can't really take on any more kids. The war is petering out. People are getting killed. People are getting punished. Pan's Labyrinth, which was also set during sort of wartime. He made Pan's Labyrinth as a companion piece to The Devil's Backbone. So if you're a fan of Pan's Labyrinth, that one is way more fantasy and creature oriented. So if you're really into that movie, I mean, you're probably going to enjoy The Devil's Backbone as well, because it's just a really well-made film. But that's the final film that we're going to be watching from Spain, Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone. So our 4 foreign supernatural horror films that we're watching tonight to kick off spooky season with a bang. From Argentina, the absolutely terrifying Terrified. From Iran, really creepy, Under the Shadow. From South Korea, The Wailing, possession exorcism movie. And then from Spain, The Devil's Backbone. So those are the 4 foreign supernatural films that we're going to be watching today to kick off spooky season. I hope you have a good time watching those films, or whatever horror films that you happen to be watching this month, but I highly recommend all 4 of those. So thanks for watching. I hope you are taking care of yourselves, watching great movies, doing whatever you can to stay sane during this absolutely insane time in our lives. See you next week.